Hello, everybody. It is Cowboy here. We got EM Burlingame with us, and everybody loves these shows with you, EM. I want to thank you for coming on. Before we get into it, though, please take a look in the description. Got a couple things for you. I got a free algo. I built it, and it's our Algo Factories free giveaway. It shows you how to build the algo, shows you how to use Grok AI to turn it into code, and it shows you the tools that traders are using to connect their algos to their exchange and have a trade for them. EM's information is in there, EM's Substack, and EM, you're one of the most prolific people on Substack that I know of. You really do a lot on X, Substack, everything. You just got so much going on. I don't know how you find time to eat, but maybe you don't eat. Maybe you're like,
yeah.
But anyway, it's always good to have you on, EM, and I know we talked about this before the show. I would say this is something, one of the comments in the comment section right now said, oh, this is a bit of a departure getting into biowarfare. Like, no, this is not a departure. I think 5th generation warfare, as you and I have discussed it, is multifaceted. It's a new kind of war, and people don't understand it. And biowarfare is part of the whole picture. And we just have so many things to talk about with 5th generation warfare. You and I could do 50 shows and never get to it all. So now we're just getting to this aspect of it. And the last thing I'll say before I unleash EM on the rest of you is understand that your background, EM, what I'll ask you to do is talk a little bit about your background and why you understand things that are medical. It's one of the things that you actually first talked about when I was first tuning into your content months and months ago, was what you were doing on the medical side of things. So please, let's just use that as a springboard. You could talk about your experience in that world and how it relates to 5th generation warfare and cellular warfare.
Yeah. I come from a medical family. So doctors, whole slew of doctors, RNs, surgical techs. One of my cousins, also a former Green Beret, went and became a physician's assistant and then a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon for SOCOM. And then another cousin on father's side was the JSOC surgeon. And so I've got a bunch of those in my family. I went down the tech path, not the medical path. The thought was early medical. And then with the brain injuries, trying to recover after diagnosis in 2019, having come from a family of doctors and having had the whole VA military medical system fail me, I'm like, well, I'm not going to let these folks tell me what I got to do to recover from this complex problem, right? The brain being the most complex system that we know of. And so I started diving in and got deeper and deeper into, how does the brain really work? And is it all biochemical, bioelectric, et cetera? And then that got me to Colonel Dimitri, Dr. Dimitri at the National Foundation for Integrative Medicine back in, I think, 2019. And I've been working with him and the foundation on a number of different things, initially around primarily just brain health and brain injury recovery. But now we're working on 3rd generation medicine and the evolution of the healthcare industry and medicine, the practice of medicine itself, moving beyond biomolecular understandings to bioelectrical understandings, like Dr. Michael Levin talks about at Tufts University. So
as as it relates to 5th generation warfare, maybe we should start there. Like, how would you, for the audience who's never heard that term, define, 5th generation warfare in a useful way that would help us move on to the biological component?
5th generation warfare, you should when people say fifth generation warfare, they think, cyber warfare, information warfare, but that's not what fifth generation, that's one aspect of fifth generation warfare. Fifth generation warfare is war for the human terrain. It's called population centric warfare. And it's to own and control and monetize anybody, everywhere, always. So it's a war on everyone at every level, always, in order to control and monetize, rent seek. And that in today's world, and actually increasingly over the last 30, 40 years, really taking off with COVID and beyond, is not only war for the humans, for the individuals, but actually the metabolic functioning of your cells, your regular body cells, your neuronal cells, the complex production of neurochemistry, neuromodulators, neuroregulators, etc. And it's a war for all of that, because all of it, right down to your cells, gets monetized now.
Okay, so excuse me. So you're talking about monetization. So we're talking about fifth gen warfare, several components to it. Cyber, there's kinetic, there's psyops, there's the biological component, and you're saying it has to do with monetization. So
it's all about it.
So how does one monetize somebody's biology?
Well, what is the pharmaceutical industry?
No, well, there is that.
Right. What is okay, so if you look at what major corporations, and there's only a small handful of them, own the majority or outright own the pharmaceutical industry, it's the food industry, food and beverage industry. So if you look at, oh, and by the way, who bought into the food and beverage industry? Tobacco. Back when tobacco was starting to get hammered and they could see that that was probably going to go against tobacco, they started investing heavily in food. And then they started in food industry, started investing heavily in the pharmaceutical industry. And now you have, from first input nutrition to end of life, you are rent seeking, monetizing the metabolic functioning of the 100 trillion or 500 trillion cells that make up each individual human being. You monetize that a whole cycle. And of course, then maybe you would ensure that there's unhealthy foods. So there's always a nutritional deficit. So then you get metabolic problems. And then you have to go get medical, massive supplement industry, which, by the way, big food is invested in too, and pharma. Be surprised how many of these food supplement, these supplement companies are owned by pharmaceutical companies through one or two cutouts. So,
for sure. That's now you're speaking near and dear to my heart. So one of the biggest concerns I have is the way that our food is grown. And this is stuff, of course, I'm going to say things that are reviewed to you, but maybe not reviewed to the audience. We started doing chemical farming, I don't know, 100 years ago. And this is everything from not only the chemical fertilizers, I think it's PKE, phosphorus, potassium, and I forget the third one. And that's, or PKN, maybe nitrogen. Either way, the fertilizer that we use, it's chemical. Now, when you grow food, there's a reason that they used to do crop rotation. Crop rotation was a way for the soil to renutritize. I don't know, to get nutrients back into the soil. Mm-hmm. And you would, when you grow the same crop, it's going to use the same sort of spectrum of nutrients. And that's why you see, like, a field might be wheat one year, corn another year, beets another year, right? If you live anywhere near farms like I do. But when you use these chemical fertilizers, it's not the soil that needs to be replenished. You're just putting these chemicals and forcing the soil to grow. And you have incomplete nutrients. And so our food has become far less nutrient dense. But this is something that a lot of people may not understand, is that it made farming really, really inexpensive. That and some of the pesticides and herbicides, right? And none of that's healthy for the food. I won't go into the EM, feel free to go into it. I'm not going to go into how the pesticides, herbicides, we all know, let's just say it's unhealthy, but has made the food very cheap as well, right? So when you have very cheap food, you can feed massive populations.
But it's not food. So there's a word in the medical industry for grocery stores. You know what that term is?
No.
Food desert.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Right? Grocery stores are food desert. If you took everything in a grocery store and combined it together, you'd have maybe 20% of the nutrition you think you have. Again, this gets back to what I said. I use the term nutrition deficit specifically because when cells at the cellular level, when cells and communities of cells are in nutritional deficit, they start to eat themselves and they start to feed on the waste products of other cells, and it causes this. So there's a great British doctor, English, sorry, somebody should shoot me for that. I have a gun with me right now, but we got to be careful in these days.
Yeah,
right?
you can't.
Telling somebody to say, so that was kind of dumb. But anyways, point being is that there's this
You got a water pistol sitting right next to you.
Got a water pistol.
Yeah.
A
little super soaker.
Well, that's not what I meant. What I meant is you don't give people permission to off you in these days because people are doing it. I'm in a state where it's legal to carry weapons anywhere, anytime. Yep. Give me a second. The English doctor, academic, Dr. Dennis Noble, was with, I believe, Oxford University for quite some time. He's a biologist. He's the one who worked out how heart cells work back in the 60s. He's in his 80s now. He wrote a book called Understanding Living Systems. It's a quick little primer, but I highly recommend everybody picks it up because it articulates what we're understanding with Medicine 3.0 is that cells are vastly more sophisticated and vastly more complicated than we ever thought. And that it isn't biochemistry that drives the cell processes, functions, etc. It's cell wall charges, port charges, so it's electropotential differential between, different ports. And then it's also the boundary conditions between the various component pieces within the cell. And that it's these boundary conditions and the fluctuations in boundary conditions that actually drives metabolic processes, right? And what does a cell do? What a cell does is metabolize. That's its whole purpose, right? But it does it in these complex ways, and it does it according to complex signaling, environmental, indirect reaction in response to the environment intelligently. There is intelligence at the cell level far more than we thought. So great little primer from Dr. Dennis Noble, Understanding Living Systems about cells that I highly recommend people pick up because, and again, he's been at this since the 60s, right? 1960s. The medical, not so much the medical, but the pharmaceutical industry and the food industry, because they're the ones who fund most of the research when it comes down to the cellular level, they have an unbelievably sophisticated knowledge of how cells actually work. And they kind of keep that from folks, et cetera. So you got to really dig and you got to really look at it. And you got to go across numerous sources, et cetera, because they know how to monetize that.
So let's think about that for a minute. So I was talking about chemical farming and talking about how the food is lacking nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about food deserts.
Yeah.
Cells metabolizing. They're eating themselves, or eating each other, I should say.
Or waste products of another cell. Yeah.
Which actually eating waste products is not good.
Yeah.
That's going to cause cancer most likely.
Yeah. All kinds of things. Yeah.
A lot of metabolic disease literally is what that's called.
What it does is it incorrectly changes the boundary conditions within the cell, which then throws off cellular metabolism, which then changes the bioelectric field of this within the cell, component pieces within the cell, on the cell wall and in the ports, while backing up further toxins because it can't extract the waste of waste, et cetera, which then further exacerbates boundary conditions within the cell wall charges, all of that, which then further dysregulates.
Interesting. Yeah. So if you're, for example, and we're going to get a little scientific here, I remember the one I actually studied. I was pre-med, and one of the coolest classes I took before I flipped majors, I was one of the 33% of pre-med who flipped over to economics at my university because I was just partying too much and I couldn't handle organic chemistry. Right.
It's no joke.
No joke. Although you talk to Tommy, he loved it. Tommy Kerrigan, that was like his thing.
Yeah.
Under any circumstance, the brain damage class was cool because my dad would joke with me. He goes, "Oh, you're taking a class on brain damage. So you really have a lot of experience there." I say, "Yeah, thanks, Dad." So now it's not a funny joke for EM, but either way, the way that the neuron fires is it gets a signal from the prior neuron, and this is from memory, so I may be 80% right on this, but the cell boundary, the condition that causes the cell boundary to flip, I think it's negative 53 like millivolts or something. And the electrical charge has to surpass a certain level, and that comes from the prior cell's signal. So if your boundary condition is not proper in a group of neurons, then you're going to have neural disease of some sort. Right? Is that, am I saying what makes sense?
You're going to have synaptic dysregulation, but what we are realizing, we've realized it for quite some time, and actually the Russians were way ahead of us on this, because the Russians under the Soviets, and I can't remember the name of the doctor, Lysenko or whatever, but there was a doctor, high-ranking Soviet doctor, who didn't think biology was, biological systems, processes, et cetera, were the place to focus it. It was wrong. And so he denied that study, and I'm getting the story bastardized a little bit, but he denied the same kind of biological studies that we did in the West, and they went down a different pathway, which was bioelectrics. Guess what we're catching up to now? Turns out the bioelectrics are actually far more important. So it's not just the firing of the previous neuron that determines the current. It's also all of the bioelectric fields of the neurons around it, the glial cells, all of it. And then the boundary conditions within the neuron and the cell itself, because there's different energy potentials, electrical potentials within the neuron itself as well. So it's a vastly more complex, and then, people I don't know, and this one I don't know about, because the electromagnetic spectrum is full at all times, even before we had all the power lines and everything else. However, the electromagnetic field that, life moved through for 4.5 billion years, for all intents and purposes, was not as structured as electromagnetic signatures. And structured electromagnetic signatures, the cells naturally try to decode, because the cells are working out both their internal bioelectric state, the cell wall immediate community electromagnetic state, and then the overall electromagnetic state that the community, the community of cells, because that's what we really are moving through. Right. So, back to the 5th gen warfare. This is research that the Nazis did very heavily in leading up to World War II and in World War II. They attained an immense amount of knowledge about how cells really work, and how it really disrupts them. And then the head, people know about Dr. Mengele, most people, right? But what most people don't know is, I think his name is General Schubert, but Mengele's boss's boss, the head of Nazi medicine, was brought directly over in Operation Paperclip and went to work with General Armstrong, who headed Air Force Medical. And at the time, in the 1950s and the 1960s, Air Force Medical was the genesis of the medical industry and healthcare today, that we know today. So this, how do you monetize 100 trillion cells, the metabolism of 100 trillion cells in somebody's body? And then how do you maximize those rents? Well, you get them on, you get them on different foods. People snack a lot. You know why they snack a lot? Because they're hungry, because their body doesn't have nutrients. So then they take artificial nutrients in. That's why a lot of people do Starbucks coffee, because it's artificial, it's simulating the energy output of a cellular metabolism. It's giving you a quick shortcut, but then you need more because you're crashing and you don't have the nutrients, etc. Okay, great. You do that for a long enough period of time, especially when people are young. And now you've got metabolic dysregulation at all kinds of levels. And, I know guys, when I started on the TBI pathway, specifically why I made sure I was heavily involved, and I mean looking right down at the way cells work and neurons and different technologies and different solutions, et cetera, is because I had two friends of mine, both Green Berets, kill themselves within 5 days of each other. Both of them had been diagnosed. Both of them were in the VA system. One was on 7 drugs. One was on 15.
That's a lot of drugs.
It's a lot of drugs. And, what was that? People were making a lot of money off of the metabolism of their cells. And I sat on the board of a pharmaceutical company founded by a friend of mine, right? For a while, for about 2 years. It's called lifetime earnings. People can look it up. When somebody has an illness or a malady that there's a pill for, or some, chemical solution for, that person's looked at their age, their background, the state of decay, et cetera. And then they're looked at, what's the lifetime earnings off of this person? What does that mean? How long are we going to be able to keep them alive? How many other drugs can we possibly sell them, whether from us or somebody else in the pharmaceutical industry? And what's the lifetime earnings off of this person until they die?
And that's actually discussed at a board level.
That's discussed at board levels when they're figuring out whether they're going to bring a drug into the pipeline or not. It's the same thing with the insurance companies, because the insurance companies are supposedly on the other side because they're figuring out, okay, what's the lifetime cost? What people don't realize is that the insurance companies probably invested in the pill or the solution, in the startup company. On the other side is an institutional investor at arm's length through an investment fund. And so the very investment in the medical solution is actually invested in by the insurance company. That's how insurance companies don't make money off premiums. Insurance companies make money off of their investment portfolio.
Well, I spent 20 years working for one, so I can definitely second that.
So they're not, people are like, well, the insurance companies, the check and balance. Like, no, what the insurance company's looking at, okay, what is our lifetime payout going to be? This is why medicines in the United States are so expensive compared to generics and others elsewhere. Why? Because they are making money. The insurance company is making money off of their investment portfolio, and that investment portfolio is a shareholder in whatever that new product, medical product, service, technology, pill, whatever is. And so the more money that company makes in their portfolio, the better the insurance company's portfolio, the more money all the people working for the company get to make, and the bonuses every year, et cetera. Well, it's okay. That $12 to make pill, let's make that $2,500. And I got to take one of them a day.
The Martin Shkreli thing.
Right?
Okay, so trying to say this properly. I'm going to give the obligatory EM Burlingame. Hold on a minute. Yeah, give me a second. It's about cash flow. What's one thing I've noticed about a lot of different companies and banks, especially, like they're making fee income. If the money isn't moving, they're not profitable, right? Yes. And one of the things that V always likes to say is that they've been chasing yield for so long, and our economy is so financialized that there's no more yield to chase. And when there's no more yield to chase, then you have to create transactions, right? And this is a way to create transactions. So earlier when I was talking about developing these chemical farming, all those type of technologies that lead to nutrition deserts. What do they call it?
Food deserts.
Nutrient deserts. So I honestly think that was done before they knew. I might be wrong about this, but it's at least possible. We should at least make some room for, hey, they were just trying to improve the world.
No, because it all happened when food companies started buying in pharmaceutical companies, all of which were initially tobacco companies who started buying into the food, Philip Morris and the others who started buying into the food. And what was all their knowledge, right? Where did that come from? How good were they at cellular stuff? So
Well, yeah. So what you're saying is the chemical farming also happened at the same time as the investment between pharma and food.
this is all done. It's all done. You can go all the way back to World War II. All this started in the late 40s, early 50s, and it all started in the tobacco industry. And then when tobacco was going to take a hit, right, to mollify the populace for, all of this, rent seeking, because this, we need to stop. In this case, when we say chasing yield, that's, some people are going to get that. What it is it's rent seeking. And what are they doing? They're renting time and capacities of your cells. So
yeah, it's like they're making you unhealthy and they're giving you a reason to buy their product. But the way that they're making you unhealthy is going to keep you alive for long enough for you to continue to buy their product for as long as possible.
they give you you got a job and you make just enough money to pay all the rents. Barely.
And at a cellular level, the way this manifests is you have bad food, causes you to get sick, to go buy the pharmaceuticals. And the pharmaceuticals
further make you sick. And so
further
now you
make you
get other.
What's that?
So now you have to get additional
Additional
pharmaceuticals, and you're instinctively trying to compensate with nutrition because at least some part of you instinctually, the cellular level, knows the problem is nutrition.
Right. So you continue to spend all of this and you have a job that pays just enough to do it. And it probably limits your cognitive capabilities as well. It definitely does. There's no question.
Yeah.
So, okay. So so a lot of people hear like biological warfare, cellular warfare. What they think of is, and while this may also be true, is like, oh, they developed this thing and it gets at our cells and it controls us. And they're thinking of it from like a sci-fi standpoint. But this is actually far more industrial,
correct,
far more broad spectrum.
Way more clever, and it's happening everywhere. Now, I'll give you one thing. I don't really like Europeans very much, right? Governments, Europeans themselves, most of them are fine, but their governments, their government structures, etc. But you go to places like Spain and France, and you can't buy half the foods or 80% of the foods we sell here for this very reason.
It's getting worse over there, but here's an example for you. So my mother-in-law has been in this country since probably 1980 or late 70s. I think she moved here in the late 70s, and has been eating our food since then, for 40 going on 50 years. Well, her mother would have been my grandmother-in-law. She came over here from the old country in, I think, like 2010-ish, around there. And so they were going to have the live scan, which is when they do the scan to find if you have blockage in your arteries.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother-in-law's mother was, kind of not, like, a little scared of it, being from the old country and not knowing what that is. And so my mother-in-law said, I'll go with you and I'll get the scan too. And my mother-in-law was 80% clogged on one of her carotid. And her mother had no problems at all.
Yeah.
And so, and one thing that is, especially amongst the farming community, there's a lot of bread being eaten. And in the old country, it's bread with every meal, especially if you're in the farming community or community of that socioeconomic strata. And I'm being delicate here. So when you come to this country and you eat the bread that's been either genetically modified or just over crossbred to have way more gluten and other issues with it, and all the other things that we talked about besides the breeding, chemical farming, and so on and so forth, then you're going to get a lot of plaque. Over there, they're not doing that, especially in Eastern Europe. Western Europe, this is my understanding. I could be wrong, but Western Europe is starting to go down that route, especially what we
UK
call
has been there, Ireland's been there.
Yeah,
but,
I was gonna say what we call Britain is there now. You go to Tesco and it's just the same stuff you have here, if not worse. You go to Pret and it feels like Starbucks.
So it's 20. People have to understand that roughly 20% of the economy is healthcare spend. It's It's $5 trillion or so, and another several $1 trillion a year in wellness products. So it is a massive rent-seeking industry. And the insane piece, the almost impossible to get rid of it piece, is that a large portion of people's retirement funds are in the corporations and companies in the industry. And so it's this pursuit of, so we have begun to worship a false god, and that false god is wealth, when the only real god we should be worshiping is life. Right? The purpose of life is life. The purpose of life is not wealth. And so as long as we continue to believe that the purpose of life is wealth, these rent-seeking systems will continue to kill us.
Yeah, and keep us weak and controllable.
Well, exactly. So
and siphon wealth off from us. So this is and this is a really good explanation for statements that you've made in the past on which we haven't elaborated, at least publicly, and even our private elaborations haven't gone this far, is that this almost goes into Jet Blake territory, and I don't think you know Jet or his work. He takes it to a spiritual level, and we won't go there. It's very clever what they're doing, and I've always known a lot of this. I've probably known 80% of this, but when you start having conversations, you get further pieces of the pie. And the medical industry, it's that whole thing that if they cure the cancer, then there's no more cancer to treat. Now, my understanding is that the only medicine on which you can legally, openly get kickbacks is chemotherapy as a doctor. And they make a lot of money for every bit of chemo that they prescribe. I was told that. I've read that. It was a long time ago. Hopefully
they get kickbacks on most everything.
But I'm talking about legally and openly.
Yeah, well, there's all kinds of other ways. It's all done legally.
Well,
right?
Yeah. How do I say? The only way they can nominally get like a commission, right?
Yeah, I got you.
The only way they can say, here, we're going to give you a paycheck, you know what I mean, is that. Of course, the pharma, I have family very close to me who are pharma execs. It's almost a business I went into, and that's a business I'm happy I did not go into. It's interesting. They used to just openly give the money. Like if you ever watch the One-Armed Man, what's that movie, The Fugitive, Harrison Ford, and you see how the doctors are taking on all these fancy trips and giving lots of money and over the drugs. And in the 90s, supposedly they had like a reform of that sort of thing, but it reformed into something else that does all the same stuff. It's just done under different names and other stuff like that.
When people look at Epstein, that's what Epstein's actual career was. Epstein's career was money laundering, and specifically money laundering to high-ranking officials, government officials, and executives, and not just executives. Sometimes I might or might not know of some very interesting deals that were done back in the day, so that certain members of certain companies got large payouts.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Or information that leads them to make a lot of money on stocks. What do we have here?
But that's what Epstein's really, all the way back to his Bear Stearns days, was money laundering, technical, legal, structural, regulatory, compliant money laundering. That was his actual skill. and his actual job. The rest of it was cover for all of that.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Maybe I heard it from you,
Mm.
but I'll believe it. It's the other stuff, like that's the big money stuff. It would make sense for that to be his primary function.
Well, it was, what was Maxwell Epstein operation? It was all part of this same thing. It's all the same stuff. It's how do you create a world, this globalized world that it's only oligarchs and rent seeking at every level.
So,
And,
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, so we're back to the subject at hand, right? We got 5th generation warfare, and then all the money laundering that's on the back of it, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
how do you move the rents around, right? So the point is, back to your, forgive me, not the point, but maybe the point is that World War III we've been fighting World War III increasingly for 40 years. It's being fought out in our cells. It's not over land. It's not over territory. All that's, yes, some of that's there too. But, 5th generation warfare is what we call population or population centric human terrain warfare. The individual and the productive capacities of their labor collectively, but right down individually to the hundreds of trillions of cells, both in our bodies and our biomes. That's where the war is being fought out. That's what the war is being fought out over, is who gets, if you can't openly just put people in chains and enslave them, how can you still enslave them though and get away with it? Well, you have to enslave their cells to a dependency upon a maximal rent-seeking system. And then you give them all kinds of quasi-expensive comforts that they pay for at great price and all kinds of distractions, so they never have a moment's peace to step and stop and think about what's being done. And you're going to find ways, social media, to monetize the fact that you're distracting them. Another rent.
Yeah, you're just taking people off their purpose, nonstop.
You are getting everyone into a belief system that wealth is all that matters, and the pursuit of wealth, and that let's put it another way. You're also bamboozling to think that technologically we are superior. One single cell in one human being's body is more sophisticated by far than all the most complex systems on Earth combined. One cell. It's that complicated and that sophisticated. And there's 100 trillion of them roughly in your body, and 4 to 5 times that in your microbiome. And those aren't all as complex as a eukaryotic cell, right? As a human eukaryotic cell. But a lot of those cells are ludicrously complex and sophisticated.
I want to focus a little on the mitochondria, if I could.
Okay. Yeah. Power pack.
Sorry before I lose this thought. So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right?
Yep.
And so basically the ATP process, all that, you end up creating energy essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I want to frame this as this 5th gen warfare. A ruler is going to direct human energies, right? And a ruler that wants to direct human energies towards the building of life is what I would call a good ruler. If we're going to go between life and wealth, right? And wealth is not all bad. It depends on.
No. But it's the servant. It's not the master.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're a ruler or a group of them, oligopoly versus monopoly, or however you want to say it, oligarch versus monarch, right? And you push your subjects, if you will, towards the creation of wealth to the detriment of life, then that
or at the cost of life.
At the cost, yeah, even so. So that's the difference between what we're seeing now and perhaps what may have gone on in the past, is that we now have technology that has allowed rulers not only to direct human energies wherever they want it to go with, like you say, the food, the social media, et cetera, but they can literally cause every mitochondrial cycle, every bit of energy they can continue to co-opt and push towards the creation of wealth such that the wealth can be extracted for their own greed and their own power.
So I want to I want to adapt or change one word from ruler to owner, because those are two different things. We don't have rulers, we have owners. Okay. And it's fractional ownership, a whole lot of owners that own in parts, different pieces of us, right? Our productivity and our time and our energy. Because guess what, people, when you are doing a job to pay the bills, you are expending a portion of your life for a monetary payment. That's the reality. Labor, physical labor, intellectual labor, whatever you're doing is a portion of your life that you are giving in exchange for whatever monetary, whatever remuneration is brought forward. So those who are doing that remuneration in exchange for some portion of your life are owners. They own some portion of your life. Okay, so that's one piece. The other piece is that if you're talking, if you want to talk mitochondria, well, the mitochondria is yes, the ATP production. However, the mitochondria and the ATP production is part of what's called the Krebs cycle, or the citrus cycle, right? And that is a very complex cycle, system of systems, and they can inject at several places in there. So at AKG level, AKG to ATP, so there's all these places in the Krebs cycle that they can inject that will influence the next 2-3 downstream processes in the Krebs cycle that causes certain metabolic dysregulation that they can sell things into.
So that injection, it's almost like a not almost, it's a top-down thing. Such injection, to me, it sounds like it's all about control, because control is going to enable them to push humans to do whatever can create an extractive situation.
Well, if you control the Krebs cycle, or you can heavily influence the Krebs cycle, you're in control of the cellular metabolism in the body, and cellular metabolism is productivity. A human being is a composite of hundreds of trillions of living beings and living units, all of which are doing the actual physical, chemical, and bioelectrical work.
So if you remember the stories that we hear about ancient slavery, going back to owners, it seemed that oftentimes they would keep their slaves weak, physically weak, because they cannot fight back. They don't have the energy to do it. They won't have the cognitive ability to plan to do it.
To organize, yeah.
Kind of sounds like what's going on here with our food.
Exactly what's going on.
And our drugs.
And the entertainment, everything. So what's happened is that every single one of us is enslaved to this nutrition cycle, this nutrition and metabolic cycle. And then we're being and we are way beyond maxing out the rents that can be taken, right down to the level of the rents available in different types of cells, because different types of food, different types of nutritional deficits cause different types of organ issues or system issues. And then they can sell specific drugs or specific supplements into, or both, and medical treatments into that specific type of cell. So it's not even just all your universally. It's like, no. They can target T cell or I can't remember the name of them, but the little insulin producing cells in your pancreas specifically. And that causes other things. Now you got insulin you're going to have to take, and you're going to have some other, right? So where we are right now is that the rent seeking is so unbelievably sophisticated that it's right down to specific types of cells in our body and specific types of cellular functioning. And how do you do that? First, you dysregulate, right? And how do you dysregulate? Well, you do it in a number of ways. You do specific types of nutritional deficits. And then celiac disease and gluten, all this shit, this all happened in my lifetime, right? or the brilliant one was the switch from A2 milk to A1 A2 milk. And most people can't process the A1 A2 proteins. And so they have, what is that? Lactose intolerance. Well, there's a good portion of the populace around the world that never had lactose tolerance. It's a thing that Scandinavians really introduced. And I shouldn't say Scandinavians. It is a thing that the Asian steppe, right, peoples introduced, right, Mongolians, what would become Scandinavians, etc. So it's not a wide. Anyways, point being is that they have maxed that system out, and they are making trillions of dollars a year off it just in the United States. And it's a portion of why they're flooding our country with hundreds of millions of more people to get them into this system, this rent-seeking system. Get them away from their healthy foods, get them away from their their natural diets, and get them into this food desert, nutritional desert, environment where now they can start rent-seeking off of selling them drugs and pharmaceuticals and everything else. They don't care if they have to prop it up or, the whole system artificially up. If you're making a 3x return, you're going to spend 1 to 2, maybe even, well, let's say you're making 3 to 5 times return on the back end, you'll invest 2 to 3 times that amount just to keep it all going. Yeah, people die, but slaves are meant to work to death.
So one thing that I like to do if I'm able to is to provide solutions, right? It's really easy to stay black-pilled, and I really don't think that's very useful. If you were to choose one place to start, if you didn't know anything about this kind of stuff, if this is all new and you're realizing, okay, I would imagine that place to start is nutrition, right? What to avoid, what not to avoid. For me, if I were to choose a spot, it would be the water and making sure that the water I'm drinking is proper. And there's a whole conversation there, but where would you start, EM? Like, what would you do to begin the process of removing yourself from that influence, or at least diminishing that influence? I know it's a broad question.
No. Well, first off, people need to take, all of us, every one of us needs to take a little bit more serious the study of how the body really works, and they need to do it from the level of the cell up. Because our bodies don't work as bodies. They actually work as very unbelievably complex, intricate communities of hundreds of trillions of cells. And you don't need to understand all of that complexity and all of the this and that. That's right. But what we have to understand is that our body is actually a community, a legion community, right? And that cells, for the most part, function in very similar ways, but different cells operate with different functions, right? Dependent functions. And so I would start with Understanding Living Systems by Dr. Noble. I would look to the work of Dr. Michael Levin at Tufts University about bioelectrics, because what happens with biochemistry is really only there to maintain bioelectric fields. So some of these things you can address bioelectrically, even if you have some of the biomolecular dysregulation, et cetera. We're getting extraordinary results with various bioelectrics. So I think everybody needs, because we are a legion community in ourselves, I think we need to take a little bit of time, and everybody should. I think, quite honestly, biology should be mandatory, and we need to do a better job of teaching it than we do now. And some form of, organic chemistry, not the bowl smoker like pre-med or med school, but some form of organic chemistry and biology should be taught to everybody at a fairly early age. So people should start there, and then they should take their nutrition very serious. And the astounding thing is that all of the information is out there related to the nutritional deficits, nutritional issues, et cetera, because, you know, there have been people involved in this fight for a long time, like Kennedy and others who are, you know, very much as they can with a system that is owned by the enemy that's got no problem assassinating people, right? Even far lower level people than might be believed. But point being is that despite all of their best interest to hide all of this stuff or just, you know, mask it, there is nutritional information on things, and you can go find, you know, hey, I've got this kind of metabolic disorder they've told me about, you know, what are the root causes and problems? And I would stay away from WebMD. It's totally corrupted, right? It's totally and absolutely, it's worse than frickin' Wikipedia. So, I mean, it was all right at the beginning, but, you know, then that's what you do, right? So what I would do is I would get a basic understanding of cellular biology. I would get a basic understanding of biochemistry versus bioelectricity. And then I would look at nutrition.
So you recommended a book, Dr. Noble, Living Systems.
Understanding Living Systems.
Understanding.
A small little book, but it's profound.
I like small books that are profound.
Yeah.
You know, it's I'm at a time in my life where time is the biggest shortage.
Life. It's not time. What people have to understand is that time doesn't exist. When we say time, what we really mean is I wish I had more life to expend.
Makes me think of Blade Runner. I want more life.
More time.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
That's what he wants. That's what he meant. Life. You know, and this is the other thing, right? This is these artificial systems. We have allowed rent seekers, slavers, to make us believe that wealth is the primary purpose of life. It's not. Primary purpose of life is life. The other thing that these same slavers have convinced us of so that we pursue wealth is that what we don't have enough of is time, or that what we're expending is time. No, what we don't have enough of and what we're expending is portions of our actual no shit life. That's
why I was thinking about the ATP cycle, mitochondria, because it's all about like you could be sitting there doing nothing. Ultimately, your body is still functioning, but the actions that we take, the things that we do, that's all going to come from energies expended. So your social media. Go ahead.
No, well, this is what I was going to say. This is where the rent seekers are so brilliant, is they realize when you are sitting there not productively doing something because you do need some downtime, or you collapse and crash, or you have a revolution. What they've done with this nutritional, pharmaceutical, medical, you know, cycle here, this Krebs cycle interruption and injects, is they've figured out how to monetize your downtime. And now it's even more, because that was working at the cellular level, but it wasn't getting your neuromodulator, neurotransmitter, and neural functioning. So then I give you social media and all these distractions so they can monetize you there too.
Yeah, that's where I was going. They just find a way to diffuse your energy. And not only do they diffuse it, but they reroute it, and they take it into directions they can steal from.
I don't know that's quite the way to look at it. They know how to monetize it. They're monetizing you, whether you're awake, asleep, whether you're actively engaged in something, whether you're actively thinking about something on their behalf. They've monetized every moment of the metabolic processing of every one of your cells.
Well, yeah, no, certainly they've done it at that level as well. I was more referring to the active action level. Certainly, yeah. If it comes down to your health and you got to pay for the drugs, and then you're less healthy, and yeah, it doesn't matter what you're doing, they're monetizing it.
Well, it's even more brilliant. You don't have to pay for it. Your insurance does.
Who pays for the insurance?
The insurance company's investments pay for the insurance.
Okay, so why am I giving my insurance company almost $2,000 a month?
Because it's a game. The monies that we pay is for administrative cost to manage all of it. We're paying for it's the whole thing is rigged, right? The biggest institutional investors are insurance companies.
Interesting. So if AI were to take like 80% of those white collar jobs, arguably they could continue to make the same amount of money with some aside from knock on effects of people losing their jobs. If let's section off what might happen to the people who lose their jobs and how they handle it and take them out of the equation. If our insurance premium is going towards managerial fees and insurance, muckety mucks at the board and their yacht payments, then the investments are actually what's
The
they're
bonuses and the yacht payments and all that don't come from the fees. That comes from investments.
okay. So our money is paying for like Janice
Middle
over in
management.
HR.
Yeah.
Okay. It'd be interesting to take the total amount of premiums in the country and find out what the total administrative cost of these insurance companies are. Because insurance, I can tell you right now, like they could probably reduce actuarials by like 90% by the time, if not more, by the time that AI is really doing its job. And that'll, I guarantee you our premiums aren't going anywhere. They're going to go up until the system is fixed. And I don't
Well,
think
until
the
it
system is
collapses,
gonna get.
because it's rent seeking, right? And so you're trying to maximize all of the rent seekers, right? Various forms. Government's another rent seeker. They produce and create nothing. They only take rents in the form of taxes and then fees and licenses, etc. Right? But this gets to something I'm working on now, and I had a conversation with a friend in Ireland early this morning. Brilliant fellow. Where they're trying to go net. Okay, so what you have to think of, we'll use the ATP. ATP is energy production, right? And every cell in your body is producing its own energy, right? Now it has to take inputs in the form of nutrients, and it has to have byproducts, in the form of waste, but it's converting everything, and then it's doing some kind of metabolic, each cell actually does way more than one kind of metabolism, by the way, right? That's again, Dr. Noble's work and boundary conditions, et cetera. So there's all kinds of metabolism stuff going on inside the cells, but the overall master power generator is the mitochondria and ATP. Okay, that's energy production. They figured out how to harness and how to monetize right down to a single cell and communities of cells. Okay, interesting. But that's still messy. You still need the illusion of an economy. You still need the illusion of a monetary system. And that means you have to have the illusion of a polity, of a society, of a civilization, governance, all of this. All of that's expensive. So what are they trying to move to now as the base of but it is the base of the economy. It used to be physical human labor in production, but once we financialize, we just move that to their cells, right? Okay. But it's messy and it's dangerous because every once in a while humans come out of the fog and they get furious and violent about every 400 years, right? Okay. Sometimes shorter than that. But for the English speaking people, it's about every 400 years. Okay. What are they doing now? Elon's talked this, Tom Luongo's talked this, others have talked it. Now what they're trying to do is transition from an economy based off of human cellular energy production to an economy based off of how much electricity utilization you have. They've openly stated it. This is the whole crypto blockchain stuff, that the value of Bitcoin is based off of the amount of energy required to sustain it. And that's what they're trying to move to as a base of an economy now. So we went from return on labor to return on capital, and now they're trying to get it to return on computation, which is really basically still energy, consumption, production and consumption. And when you look at it that way, you're like, wow, what does that mean? They're trying to transition beyond humans because you can simulate humans and human activity at vastly lower cost than actually having to maintain humans.
So let's talk about that. Because at that point, you're just looking at a system where energy is produced And then it's used in compute.
So what are they building? What's all the words, all the conversation, AI, AI, AI. We need to build all these data centers, and they're going to have their own micronuclear power reactors.
Right.
If
Yeah,
we look
and
already,
Bill Gates came out just like in the last couple of days saying, "Oh, climate change isn't going to kill us. We're going to be fine." Like he finally had to admit it because he probably needs those data centers as much as anybody else, and so now he's going to, walk back what he's been trying to use to kill us for 20 years, and they're going to think of some new way to kill us.
I
So
think
if,
I have a different take on this, Nick. Just came to me this morning.
okay,
Okay. I think the whole green thing was specifically designed with the understanding they were going to try to move to this return on energy, compute, this return on compute economy 30 some odd years ago, 40 years ago, because that's really where it starts. Read Nick Bogstrom and others, right? So I suspect that the whole green thing was a way of waging war such that our competitors would dramatically reduce their energy production capabilities so they couldn't compete with us on a compute-based economy.
well, that would fit. Excuse the camera being off for just a moment. That would fit because most of the data centers are here in China.
Here, yeah. And
So
what do we
push the
do?
Green New Deal. You could argue that whoever's running the game made sure that Europe bought the Green New Deal bull stuff so that we could pretend we're going to go along with it. But now okay. Go ahead.
Right?
Continue, please.
What did Germany just do? Germany just blew up 2 more of its nuclear reactor towers, so it can't bring them back online. What are we doing? We are impoverishing. So what are we doing with what were the owners at the high table doing with the Green New Deal? They were impoverishing certain parts of the world and ensuring that when they tried to catch up in this return on energy consumption called compute economy, that they were at a disadvantage.
So the high table, they really have no loyalty to any lands, do they?
No.
Yeah. Because the high table, I mean, from what we're able to discern, we think they probably originated in Europe. And yet by this move, you're suggesting that they're depowering Europe.
Well, they brought the Roman Empire down. They've brought empires down left and right when they're done with them. When that population is used up, or that population has just become numb and no longer is manipulatable or controllable, or more importantly, the populations come to a point where they're just exhausted and they go back to, when enough of the populace goes outside, looks at sky, touches dirt, now you know you're in trouble.
Right. Yep.
Right? Now the owners of the high table are like, oh crap.
Oh shit,
Right?
they're touching grass.
They're touching grass, they're looking at sky, they're breathing air. What do you're in trouble, because when humans get to that point, they're burned out. You can't, their cells are exhausted. I mean, that's quite literally what's happening.
I believe
cells are exhausted. And it's like, oh, okay. Like I'm exhausted every day thinking through all these things, etc. So give me a second. They are, for all intent, the owners of the high table, for all intents and purposes, and this is what the stable coin deal is. This is what this getting into 401ks by private equity so that the private equity can participate in retirement accounts. All of this is setting up the theft of the boomers' wealth to make sure it doesn't actually transition to Gen X and millennials and Zoomers. Is to put it right back into government debt, because that's what the whole stablecoin thing is. They buy, for all intents and not for all intents and purposes, it is a direct tax where you will take, you will buy our debt and you will work to pay off that debt in the form of paying taxes to pay off that debt so that we can continue to monopolize and own the high table in the world. That's what it is. That's what this whole Genius Act and all that shit is. And why the boomers' wealth? Because it's the last pool of privately held and owned wealth that is transferable to the next generations.
Yeah, you can't seek rents on private wealth, ultimately. I mean, you can manipulate, you can push around, but ultimately, when you hold the wealth, right?
And it's that sizable of wealth. So, point of, so this, I'm going to start writing about it here, as I'm thinking about it. It's going to go into chapter 40 of Azrael Burns next, right? I don't know that they're going to succeed this time, because what is this? This is quite literally a transition, the third transition in my own lifetime as the base of an economy. We went from return on labor when I was younger, till I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and we were firmly in the return on in the knowledge economy, right? Return on capital. And now they're, because that's really what the knowledge economy is not return on knowledge, it was return on capital, right?
Got it.
So return on labor, return on return on labor is productive economy. You build things, you produce things, you physically do things. Return on capital was just return on where can you put your money and get a return off all these manipulated, controlled ways, rent, higher rent seeking, financialization. And now what they're firmly committed and pretty much at the last stages of within the next couple of years is a transition to a return on compute, which is really a return on energy consumption economy. 3 times in my life, and I'm not even 60 yet, they've done a fundamental change. Well, we have never seen that before in human history. Never. We saw, and there's a point I'm getting at.
Yeah, there was I'm sorry. So I'm not going to talk long. Industrial Revolution, information age, and now the energy age, if you will.
Yes. And industrial revolution was still a return on labor economy, still a return on productivity economy. It just moved from the farms to the factories, but it was still okay. I don't know they're going to succeed this time because of thermodynamics. The laws of thermodynamics, the laws of conservation of energy, and Maxwell's equations. At a certain point, you cannot sustain the illusion of the system because you run up against hard physics and chemistry restraints.
If I may?
Yep.
Energy is always conserved. It's never created nor destroyed. So what they're doing is, and let me see if I can make the leap here. Are you perhaps saying that without human energy being an input, this is going to fall apart?
Very good. So there is nothing we do as sophisticated in terms of energy production and energy utilization and efficiency as a single cell in a human body. We don't even come close in anything that we're doing to that 4.5 billion year iteration to the most optimal energy production utilization system in the known universe.
And there's hundreds of trillion tech and do better than that.
Correct. And it's not even close. I mean, they're not even orders of magnitude apart. They're like a universe apart. Right? So I think it's going to fail. Now, here's the other reason I think it's going to fail is because when you see consumptive systems, complex consumptive systems, think a star, transition this quickly between fundamental inputs or fundamental processes, it means that star is in, or that system is in collapse.
Yeah.
It's in collapse, not going to collapse. It's already collapsed. It's just accelerating through the fuel sources and the processes till it blows off or collapses collapses into a singularity, or does both.
So these people who are attempting to use, compared to our bodies, a very primitive technology, they're trying to fuel a nuclear power plant by burning a wood fire.
Yes.
Yeah. And what they're going to do, according to what you're saying, is that these people are societal cannibals. This is a death cult.
They're slavers. Let's just call them what they are. They are slavers. You don't defeat slavery. This is the resentfuls in the Eternal War I wrote about. These people are slavers. That's all they think about every minute of the day.
and they would rather have a marginal return to failure than lose their power.
Correct.
And they have to know that that's what they're doing. They can't think that they can honestly push what is ultimately an inferior technology to make a new big society. They have to know it's going to fail.
Okay. Yes and no. The ones who own the table know it's going to fail. They've already moved to another host. And that's actually what we're fighting out around the world right now, because they tried to settle into the Middle East, as we've discussed before. Now they're trying to first they tried China or Russia 30 years ago, then China. They both said no. The last 20 years, they've been trying to settle into the Middle East, UAE and Qatar. We've just been in this, the last few years saying no, right? Where are they trying to go now? India, Pakistan, they're trying to settle in there. And that was that whole kerfluffle they tried to start up there between India and Pakistan. And they're still trying to do that. And that one might succeed. I don't know, but that's a huge risk, because Indian and Pakistanis are all over the English-speaking world. They're all over the world, and they're all in these high-ranking positions, et cetera. So we'll wait and see there. But point being, in response to your statement, no, they'll kill the host. The host doesn't matter to them. They already moved to another host, and what we're fighting out right now at the highest level, at the owners of the table kind of level, is trying to deny them a new host and force them back to Europe and cram them back into Europe, and then identify them here and highlight them here and in the Middle East and in the Russian world and in China and elsewhere, and crush them, right? And force them back into Europe and just keep them there the best we can, right? So the next freaking viral bloom plops, comes out. I suspect the collapse has already happened, and we are just accelerating through the burning up of the last opportunities and fuel sources. And then, forgive me, something just came back to mind. I was trying to your question. The owners of the table know, but not everybody at the table knows. And certainly not, who sit at the table, right? The people who own the table are not the people who sit at the table, and the people who are in front of the table, talking with those who sit at the table, are not the same. So there's enough that have come to the table, and there are enough at the table who believe it, that they're going to chase it and drive it with all vigor and intent. And here's why. I was thinking about this earlier this morning too, more clearly, but when you achieve systems of such complexity as we have everywhere and everything, you tend to have folks with Asperger's and autism rise up in those positions, because they're the only ones with that nuanced, nitty gritty facts and details and data, and they're the only ones who can metabolize the complexity. And so you wind up with a whole lot of people that are often quite genuine, even if they're going down doing horrible things, but they probably, like Bill Gates, he probably believes absolutely that this is what needs to happen. The dude's borderline straight up autistic, though, if you ever listen to him or talk to him, etc. Well, the problem is that those types of people are horrible at identifying resentfuls and resentfuls behaviors, because they lack that nuanced human interface, 90% of body language that's in nonverbal, they lack those skills. And so it's very hard for the folks who rise up in the top positions in corporations and elsewhere to realize that they're being played, and that they're being used for their, autistic complex skills to enslave humanity.
So it seems like the game to play from our own standpoint, right, is avoid the grift as best we can, stay healthy, do what you can, right? And that's a longer conversation, perhaps for a different show, I don't know. But this seems like it's going to have to play itself out.
Yes.
So as something like this plays itself out, if what you're saying is the case, they're going to try to shoehorn this technocracy into power, if you will, right? Because that seems like it's what you're talking about as a technocracy.
Yeah, well,
this energy thing,
everybody should read Nick Bogstrom's Superintelligence.
Another book I need to write down,
because it's where they're trying to go.
And at the risk of being lazy, is it Nick's? How do you spell his last name?
Bogstrom, Bogstrom, I believe. Superintelligence is the book. Yeah.
Now, with this, like, can you give us a preview?
It's boil Nick's work down altogether, and it's that you have runaway computation that consumes all matter and energy in the universe to try and feed its computational requirements. So,
okay.
Right. So let's, and one last piece, and I'm terribly sorry, I'm going to have to jump off, but
that's no problem.
What human beings need to understand is that each one of the cells in their body is computing. Now, it's not computing like a computer, but it is computing the environment. It's computing the boundary conditions internally, externally. It's computing vast, vast amounts of information. Life requires an immense amount of environmental computation. And our cells, a single eukaryotic cell does it in unreal sophistication, complexity, and efficiency. And there is no system on Earth, none, no system we've ever devised that comes anywhere close to the computational complexity and richness and efficiency of a single cell. And we have hundreds of trillions of, 30 to 40 trillion in our body, maybe 100, we don't know exactly. And then 3 to 4 times that in our biome, in the sinuses, on the skin, and in the gut, right? All of that computational richness working, doing unreal complex things. So AI is nonsense. For AI to be real, it would have to be able to compete with the computational complexity of a single cell. And we're not even remotely close. And we're building all these data centers, and we got all this, right? That's the other thing. If we had quantum computing, we wouldn't be building data centers everywhere. Everything would be getting smaller. And if AI was really working, we wouldn't be building all that, having to put in $1 trillion a year into this infrastructure, because everything would be getting smaller and smarter, because that's the trend when you've actually crossed a capacity threshold. Everything now starts to miniaturize. It comes down in cost, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you could ask AI, how could you get more efficient? And it would tell you.
Right. I can't even get, Grok to answer any real complex questions. I've got to be I've got to think about how the coders and the folks who did the training data that trained the LLM, I have to think about how they thought in order to write my prompt in such a way and with such sophistication that I can get anything usable out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a great search engine, right? It's a great advanced search tool.
Yeah, it makes fun slop. When building algos, it's a similar thing. Like, you have to understand the way that a computer sees things in order to even get anything intelligible out of it.
Yeah.
And so if you look at that video, it's the links in the description. You watch me go through Grok and you see how I prompt it. And it's like very, black and white. And it only understands the inputs that it can understand. And so if we it's crazy. So it's almost like the limitation isn't our brain.
No.
The limitation is our ability to use language to try and simulate a mind. And language is going to be nowhere
impossible.
Yeah, there's just nowhere near the amount of refinement of language to simulate.
Yes,
such
it's
things.
impossible.
It's just not even a fucking, excuse my language, a flea on the back of an elephant.
It's not even possible. There is some work happening out of MIT. There's a gentleman doing micro robotics and communities of micro robotics. If we're ever going to get to actual AI, it's going to be down the pathway he's going. But there is no robot nor even mass collections of robots anywhere as sophisticated as the computational capabilities of a single cell.
Well, I know you have to go.
Yep.
This was a lot of fun, and sometimes it takes a minute to get, to get down to it. But even the path is a lot of fun. So thank you for coming on.
Yep.
I mean, I think this particular video could generate a number of other videos. But it's always been, when you would say that, you would say, World War III or 5th gen at a cellular level. Like, now I get at least most of what you were talking about. I'm sure we could always refine. But before we go, any last thoughts?
No, this is just where my thinking is now. I'm going to write it out in terms of, once the at some point they're going to come to the acceptance, because they have to, that they're not going to be able to do this return on computation economy, that you still need humans to do real things, and then set to fixing all of these freaking problems that they've created because of this illusion they had. We're going to have to reorganize ourselves in ways we've not seen for 50 years, 60 years, and maybe even further back, to focus back on life as the master and wealth as the servant. And that doesn't mean everybody runs around impoverished and poor and all that. We don't need to do that. We can still strive towards being a type 1 civilization without chasing wealth, without chasing tech. And I think we should try to become a type 1 civilization. I think that's the agenda and the objective. But we can't get there if we chase wealth, because we're not taking the most efficient computational resource in the known universe and trying to model our systems, our complexity, and better, to be quite frank, just better utilizing that resource.
I mean, I would argue that chasing wealth purely has led us to the extractive type scenario that we're in right now.
Correct.
I think we have the technology, if we were to eliminate the grift and the graft, and we had the technology to be type 1. We're just focusing our energy on where it's being directed rather than where we're directing it.
Correct. I think we're a ways away. I think we're at some like 0.7 right now, so we're not even 1 yet. But I think, and maybe might not happen in my life, I don't know, now that the boundaries are coming off of physics that have intentionally been there for 60 some odd years to just take us all down the wrong physics pathways, some things might happen rather quickly, right?
Yeah.
But we gotta, all of us, all human beings need to realize that your body is comprised of hundreds of trillions of living cells, living, highly efficient, energetic cells, computational resources, vastly more sophisticated than any systems ever built, anything we can even simulate. And you need to honor that. You need to respect that and better use it. And the way in which you do that is realize a war is being waged inside your cells. It is total enslavement. It's for total control. It's maximizing the rents. And the way you beat it is you get smarter about your nutrition, and you get smarter about sleep rest cycles, and you get smarter about not burning up all your energy and consuming entertainment. Truth of the matter is, sometimes we need to just sit down and shut the fuck up and not watch anything and not pay attention to anything and just be. And maybe the Buddhists and some of these other masters had that bit right. And including even, the Christian monks, that, the meditative prayer kind of monks, right? So I'm not trying to make this a religious thing. It's like, who lives to be 100 years old? Yeah, no, sorry. The folks who live to be 100 years old, if you ask them, healthy in their 90s and hundreds, without exception, they all tell you one thing: they didn't chase all the entertainments. They spent a good amount of their day just sitting still.
I talked to a guy like that. He said what you said, but a little different. This farmer guy. And it's a guy that I used to buy my beef from out near us. And there was a farmer who was near him physically, like in the same area, and he's 105. He's out there working, putting the sump pipes in, and obviously he's not working like he used to. But his comment was, when asked, how do you keep it going like this? He goes, never sit down, never see a doctor.
Same stuff.
And what he means is that he kept working. He continued to work at his labor.
Yeah.
Because he loves his life. So yeah, if you're working and you love your labor, then why would you seek entertainment?
There you go. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
All right.
and there's more to it. I mean, you and I have
Yeah.
discussed meditation. That might even be
Yeah.
a really good show to do at some point in the future, is a way to, maximize.
All right, man. Well, been a good one.
Thanks, EM.
Yep. Cheers.
All right, everybody, look in the description, get EM's data from there. Link is in there. EM Burlingame, once again, thanks again.